What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Major Mixtape Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Hope you're doing well whenever and wherever you are listening to this. Now, this is a music interview podcast, but today we're going a little differently because we're talking sports, we're talking hoops, because I have, as the guest today, the Director of Basketball Operations for the Canadian Elite Basketball League, Jason Tom. Jay, welcome to the show. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Long time no see, but it's probably a lot of people nowadays. So, but really, really good to be on with you, man, and really good to see you again.
So for those, for our listeners who don't know and maybe not be familiar with the Canadian Elite Basketball League, what is the CEBL?
CEBL is a Canadian basketball league that runs in the summertime, which is really there to help the development of our players. Everyone talks about the Canadian basketball landscape right now and how many great players there are, but outside of the NBA, there's a ton of players that play overseas in Europe. This league actually runs in the off season to those leagues, which allows the players to come home, play in front of friends and families, make money as well, and then actually just create opportunities for people who want to be involved in basketball at all the different levels. That's the way it started up, and then it ended up being the only league that was running in Canada through the pandemic, which was a huge credit to the people who were involved in the league. And then now it's the largest professional league in Canada, as we've now added 3 more teams this offseason. So we now have 10 teams across Canada. So that's more than the CFL. It's more than any other Canadian only professional league. So that's it in a nutshell, man. And it's something that I'm very proud to be a part of. That's for sure.
You mentioned that new teams joined this year, and one of them was the Newfoundland Growlers.
Yeah.
And because of that, the CEBL is now literally coast to coast, which is something that no other sports league really in Canada can claim. How important is it to be able to say that the CEBL does go from coast to coast?
Well, incredibly important because everybody feels included. I guess the one area that's missing right now is Manitoba, and of course they were quick to point that out when we announced Newfoundland, which is always the case, but just a matter of time before we're hitting there as well. But it's important for a number of different reasons. Canada, generally speaking, when it comes to basketball, has been very focused in the Greater Toronto area. Quebec is now exploding, but there's so many places across Canada, like at the high school level, which is where I was involved for a number of years. There's so many different places where players are being found. And now to get it at a professional level, all those kids have an opportunity now to say, okay, I can play here at home in Canada and play here in my home city. But then on top of that, it's opportunity for everybody in those different cities, like from the front office, coaches, ticketing, just opportunities for jobs in Canada and the sports world just aren't really there right now. And that's what, the CEBL is doing. And I really think the other part of it as well is, it's really easy to go places where you can sell tickets and where things are already happening, but it takes a special type of group to go to places that are a challenge and to make it work. And I think that is what the CEBL is doing such a good job of right now. And I have to say, the reason why so many places like the CFL, for example, doesn't go all the way to the east, and the cost is extreme to be able to cover this country from the east to the west. It is half the price of a plane ticket to go north and south, sometimes twice as far as it is to go east and west. And I say that just because it's not easy. It's not something that can be done easily. And that's why nobody has really done it to this point.
And that was one of the things I was curious about, is the logistics of it. You mentioned it's easy to be able to say, we're going to put a team in Toronto, we're going to put a team in Montreal, we'll put a team in Vancouver because A, they're mainland, B, those are major population centers. But to be able to go out to, either the smaller cities, in the middle of the country, or to be able to go to the Maritimes, like that has got to be a logistical nightmare when it comes to putting the season together.
Yeah. And I mean, this will be my first full year in dealing with that. But yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, it comes to great planning, and it comes to everybody buying in and understanding that this isn't easy. And there are some sacrifices that are going to be made. The players have to understand that, but at the same time, basketball players, especially, they're used to that grind. They're used to the long bus rides. They're used to, not being, or the long flights and not being given, the NBA level of treatment. And it's because of that. It's that grind. It's that ability to be able to do what you love and do what you have a passion for, but having to sacrifice in order to do that. Every one of these players have had to do it coming up in their careers. So why would it be any different at the professional level, right? And same with the people involved in the front office. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get to this in the broadcast here, but I had to grind. I had to, like, this is a job that didn't exist when I ended my mainstream media career, right? You have to have that hope. You have to have that that thought of brighter a brighter future ahead before it actually bears fruit. And I think that's what the players understand. So there's going to be some times, I'm sure, where guys are stuck in an airport and they're saying, man, this is terrible. But at the same time, when they understand that, they're playing, say, a championship game in Newfoundland in front of a packed house, and then being able to go out that night and experience the uniqueness of a place like that, they're going to understand that life experience is something that they would never get if this league didn't exist.
When you think about basketball in Canada, obviously there was a major swell of interest when both the Raptors and the Grizzlies, came to be. And then, of course, Vancouver moved down to Memphis. And the Raptors, while they were a good team, they weren't, making waves in the playoffs. Obviously, now a lot has changed. The Raptors were champions in 2019. There's a lot of good Canadian talent coming up into the NBA. Canada is doing well as far as FIBA goes. Is now the perfect time for the light to be shone on the CEBL?
Yeah, and I think we're already seeing it, and that has been incredibly helpful, especially again going through two pandemics. We played a summer series down where I am actually now in Niagara that lasted 2 weeks, and it was 20 games jammed into that period of time. But that gave us this opportunity to be the only sporting league in Canada at that time, literally playing through a pandemic. So that shined the light on us. Then the following year, this past year, we had a condensed season, but we were able to go back out to all the different cities, and then fans were allowed back in. So we were one of the first sporting events to allow fans back in. So that gave us a spotlight. And then we had players from our league now playing in the NBA G League. And these are people who were stars in our league and then play major minutes now in the G League. So those connections were made. We have coaches that are coaching at a high level, everybody making it to the next stop. And then a lot of guys that are playing internationally. I mean, the senior men's national team, you mentioned FIBA, senior men's national team played the Bahamas live on Sportsnet. And I think the number was, 7 of those guys played in the CEBL previously. So those are all connections that are being made, and they're talking on the broadcast about the CEBL. And we saw it also to switch over to soccer with all the great things that we saw with the Canadian team in Edmonton there. And they were talking about their pro league, the CPL, which is like a close cousin of the CEBL, and talking about all the similarities between those two things. And I reached out to Christian Jack after that was over and just said, man, it's crazy to think that we came up together at the Score talking about the similarities and the challenges between basketball and soccer. And that was over a decade ago, and not even understanding how this would all come together. And now we're both involved at that level, seeing that same thing progress. So how important is it for the CEBL to have the spotlight on it? Extremely important, but it's equally important for the CEBL to succeed for the betterment, not only of the sport, we talked about the young kids, but for the national programs on both soccer and basketball. The similarities are striking. And it all goes back to the fact that something that you and I talked about in the suites all the time back at the Score is just like, man, like hockey's not the only sport in this country, even though corporate Canada up until, well, probably still now thinks that way. Well, that's changing rather quickly.
Let's talk about you first for a little bit here, because you mentioned the Score, and during your days at the Score, you were very involved in making sure that Basketball Canada got a lot of coverage. So what was it that drew you to making sure that, the game up here, up north, got its fair, its due coverage?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've thought about it a lot. And I think what it was, and now, with age and hindsight and everything along those lines under our belt, like I think it was a matter of understanding like where you're needed, right? And even if, I mean, at 25, 24, when we were getting paid to do our one job, and then I was asking all my editors to help me edit stuff on top of that because it was my passion project. I wasn't thinking, I'm here for basketball. I'm here, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? It was just like, I just loved it. And as now I look back on it, it was, and you can call it whatever you want, karma. You can, if you want to get into, religious feelings on it. I just felt like I was really doing the work that needed to be done. And I was put in that place to do it. Like I was given this platform, and it was really easy. And I see this for young people now who just do the bare minimum, right? Like, this is my job. That's what I'm going to do, and do it to the best of my ability. And then I'll wait for somebody to realize, oh, you're really good, let's move you up. Well, that's not the way I thought, right? It was, I can always do more. And I know you were the same way. So that's why I knew I could lean on you to help me, after we were done editing 5 baseball games, that if you needed to cut 2 hours of B-roll with me, you'd get those thumbs smacking on the keyboard and we'd be able to get it done. And that was because you knew that the passion I had, and you were thinking the same thing. Probably it's like, well, I'm here, I'm in this position to do this, I'm going to do it. And I think that's what I felt like. It was just like, I was given this amazing platform of national television. And, I didn't know what I was doing it for. It was like, oh yeah, I want to be on TV. And then I was like, I don't know if I really want to be on TV. Right. And it was like, it's cool to do these highlights, but then some days it's like, it's kind of boring to keep doing like, Dodgers Padres at 10:40 at night and be finished at 3 a.m. Right. So it was like, well, what else can I do? I'm sitting here in a television station. Like, there's gotta be like, man, like this is so cool. And I always say that to people now. I mentor so many people now, and they always like, what's your advice? And my advice is do everything. Like, do anything, any opportunity that comes, just do it. Don't think, I could go do this. Like, do it. You're in that position for a reason, even if you don't know why you're in that position. So just do as much as you can do, and then do more. And it's not a matter of like stretching yourself too thin. Just like, you're never in a spot unless you're meant to be there. And I just think when I was young, I didn't realize that, I'm sure. But I think now, especially because people are just so focused on, Instagram and TikTok and all that, there's always something else to take your mind off of what you're doing. And if you can stay focused on where you are and what you're doing and use that moment, you'll never regret it. And I think that's why I just latched on to basketball. I saw that there was a need for this sport to be pushed to the forefront. And now when I see I'm on Twitter, I barely ever tweet anymore because it's like, I don't need to. Like, there's so many people talking about Canadian basketball, right? Like, there's so many guys, like, people doing it out of their own passion, people at Sportsnet now. Like, I don't need to, because there's hundreds of people who are now doing where there was 5 people doing it when I was doing it. Now there's hundreds. So I feel like I played my part, if that makes sense.
Now, you spent some time doing, content for Canada basketball as far as like videos and whatnot go. And when you think about those early days, when you and I were at the Score, and, up here, there was, 3 sports channels, and that was kind of, how people got fed their sports content. Now you're seeing these, elaborate, well-produced features and documentaries that end up on team websites and YouTube and the like. How important is it to, the expanse of the media landscape and the accessibility of the media landscape to get these stories out there? How much of that has helped in spreading the word of basketball in Canada?
Yeah, like tremendously. I think sometimes I wonder, I think before, if something was on TV, you felt, oh, like, so this has hit a certain level that it deserves this platform. And again, going back to why I put that towards basketball, it's because I wanted to say this is worthy of a story, right? Up next, it's like Corey Joseph. You should know who Corey Joseph is, right? And now he's one of the most decorated NBA players of NBA games played in international career, period, right? Like, you should now. The only thing now I find I struggle with is like that, just because you have something done on you doesn't mean that I don't want to say deserve it. It doesn't mean that you've earned that yet. And as long as the people who have these things done on them realize that, as long as they use it as, well, this is my fuel, right? Like, okay, well, I've had this done on me, so now I have to uphold that expectation. I think that's the biggest thing, because you talk about mixtapes, made you a mixtape. Well, mixtapes in the basketball realm used to be a very big, important thing. If you had a highlight mixtape done on you as a player, that means that you are a certain level. And it got to a point, well, that's not the case anymore. But everybody deserves exposure. Like, everybody deserves an opportunity to be seen. What I wish would come with that is like a document that you had to sign. It's like, I, Jason Tom, understand that just because I had this mixtape done does not mean that I've made it. It does not mean that I'm better than the guy who hasn't had it done. And all it means is that I have to work even harder to show that I deserve to have this done. I wish that was like a thing, because that's my only concern. But you do see it, like everybody has, and like every team has their own group to be able to do a story. And the positives behind that is where before it was impossible to know all the different stories. Nobody knows the stories better than the team themselves and the people themselves. So at least they can put those stories out there. I do think there's a bit of a sensationalism to it a little bit. I think it got to a point where it was like, I don't know. I remember, a heart-wrenching story of something terrible happening and overcoming tragedy. And it was like, wow, like that was a really beautiful story. Like that was amazing. And now it got to the point where it's like, it's almost like you're reading through the obituaries and you're like, okay, like what terrible story can I find? Ooh, that one. Okay, perfect. That's perfect. Let's do that. Let's put all that together into a little story and make people cry. And then that means it's a good story. That's something that I struggle with a little bit. And I think that's why I'm glad that I'm out of the media landscape now. It goes back to the thing that we always learned in school, right? If it bleeds, it leads. I feel like if it bleeds, it leads just morphed into this weird, if it makes you cry, then, make it lead. I know it doesn't rhyme, but you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like it cheapened it just a little bit for me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that there's not still great things coming from it.
Now, you mentioned that this is going to be your first year tackling, the CEBL as the director of basketball operations. Prior to this, you were in the broadcast booth. So going from calling the games to now, in essence, calling the league, how is that transition going to be for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing too is that like my title is director, and I mean, like full transparency, I'm 3 months into this, and I'm currently planning a training camp, for a team that will be heading to Nicaragua to play in the Basketball Champions League of America, a groundbreaking thing, that a tournament here in North America that's been going on for a while, but it's the first time that any team north of Puerto Rico has been involved. So logistics by my father. So I'm all about logistics, and it's marrying all this stuff together and things that I learned being a feature producer of, piecing everything together. So it all makes total sense. Right. But I would think, as being a director, the biggest thing that I'm going to have to, work through, along with being a broadcaster is, and I was a pitcher in baseball when I was younger, and I likened it to the same. I'm a broadcaster now. Like, when I'm in that role, I'm like, well, I control it all. Right. So, and it's the same as being a pitcher in baseball. Like, if I want to speed the game up, I'm going to speed the game up. If I want to slow the game down, I'm going to slow the game down. If you know what I mean, I want to plunk this guy with the baseball, I'm going to plunk the guy with the baseball. Like, I'm in control. And as a director, you're never in control, but you're always calling the shots from a distance. And I think the biggest challenge I have now is to not be hands-on. Like, say, for example, logistics. Like, I'm planning pickups and drop-offs at the hotel. My first thing is like, okay, well, I got room in my car. I'll just pick them up and take them over. And as a director, like, that is not supposed to be your first thought. As a director, it's like, who do I have on my team to pick those people up and bring them over? Right. And then I will show up and I will play my role as director of basketball, which is like, high level problem, come to me. You know what I mean? Hey, oh yeah. Okay. Go talk to that guy, 'cause that's the person who I've put in position to deal with that. right? And that's what I have to learn. And I think that, and again, coming with maturity and coming with all the different things. And then same as a broadcaster, it's like something has happened in the game. I don't know what's happening. I have to find out what's happening. As a director, it's more like, well, I have to foresee those problems. And if the problem comes and I haven't thought about it before, I must react like I'd already had a plan for that to happen. And those are, I think, the challenges that I'm going to face and that I have faced. But luckily, people wear a lot of hats in the CEBL, and I'm still going to be able to call some games. So I'm actually setting everything up for this team to have the training camp. I'm technically hands off at the camp. I will be there kind of, overseeing things and talking with coaches and general managers and everybody that comes along with it. And then when the team flies off to Nicaragua, I'm then going to be going into the studio at the CEBL offices and calling the game. What's great about that is nobody has more information than I do about this team. So I'm going to be able to sit down and I don't have to prepare as much because it's all right here. And again, I think it goes back to, we talk about all the time about having the opportunity, everything you've done, all the skills that you've learned are in your tool belt and you're ready to use them. That's what I'm at now. Like, this job uses literally every skill at every position that I've ever held up until this point in my life. I use all of that in this job now. And that's the way life really should be, I think.
In your role as director, which of the two is more important to you? Developing the players or developing the game?
Developing the game. And I think it's because that's what needs development. The players develop themselves, the coaches develop them. The players are always going to take care of themselves. Genetics is caught up in Canada. Skill level is caught up in Canada. It's the game and the structure that really needs all the work. And, there was a gap post media before this job at the CEBL, good 5 years, where I was just taking little gigs of broadcasting here or there. And I would not suggest anybody to do that in the basketball realm because it does not work out well for your pocketbook. For people who don't know what a pocketbook is that are young listeners, look it up. But generally speaking, over that time, the first thing I thought of was, okay, how can I help the game? I used my platform to raise up people and get the knowledge out there. That platform was taken away from me. So now how do I help? And that was my first thought. How do I help? How can I make the game better? Because when I was an observer, I was like, oh, this is bad. And how's that? And this tournament was run terribly. And like, who's doing this? And you know what I mean? Like, is anybody, I see in hockey, there's great structure, Timbits hockey and minor Adam and this, and you move all the way up and then the OHL and all that. What's this for basketball? And I always looked at the national program saying, oh, that was it. And then I got to know the national program. I'm like, no, man, they're underfunded and understaffed. They're not the group. So it was this in-between period that I worked with North Pole Hoops, which is, a startup company. I say that they've been around for 10 years. They're a scouting service of scouting all these players. But at the same time, they put on events, they put on showcases, and they, again, providing exposure and platforms for high school players. And I threw myself into that. And again, a lot of that volunteer time. Every portion of my entire career is built off of volunteerism, right? And North Pole Hoops is exactly that. And then as things built there, they started up a prep league, the National Preparatory Association, that ran coast to coast across Canada at the high school level. Hockey already had it, basketball didn't. I was the commissioner of that league, learning all these things that I'm now putting into perspective here in the CEBL. But again, I did that because I wanted to contribute to the structure of the game and provide opportunities. And then now the CEBL didn't exist when I started at North Pole Hoops, didn't exist. And then it started up, and now I've just made that progression on. And Jay, developing the game is developing the people, not the players, the people involved in it. I've now helped build a pathway for somebody who wants to be involved in basketball outside the game, right? Referees, scorekeepers, front office, administration, although this pathway didn't exist. It was just like, oh, you could volunteer at a high school level, and then there's the NBA. There was nothing here. And I've helped build this gap. I've been able to help bridge it. And now I can tell people to go to North Pole Hoops, put your time in there, learn the different things, I will see you learn. I can help mentor you along. And then eventually there'll be a spot here in the CBL. And that's really what I'm envisioning. And that's building the game, and it's building the structure of the game, and providing opportunity for people. And I think that's what really is my passion, is providing opportunity for people in the sport that I love.
Now, this is, of course, sort of a music podcast. So I want to bring up something about the CEBL, and that's the CEBL sound system. As far as the CEBL life section goes, what is sound system when it comes to the different teams in the league?
Opportunity again, right? Ansh Sanyal, I hope I said his last name correct, just wants to build off of that in the CEBL Life series and all these other things. And it's all about bridging, the sport and music. And I mean, that was something that we always kind of loved, taking it back to the Court Cuts days at the Score and Brendan Lynch and all these other things with music and the sport, how they just marry together. And the CBL is doing that as well. But it's providing opportunity as well for young people in the different areas, in these different cities, that want to try to get their name out there, right? Like, it's great that Drake is the ambassador of the Raptors, but there should be, and again, he built that for himself, but there's now an opportunity to do that in all these different cities with these CEBL franchises, right? Like, I was in Montreal for the launch there, and, we're sitting around talking, and it's such an amazing venue there. And we're like, man, it would be great to come here. And not only is it unique, the setup, but now think about, because in the CBL, the other thing to add to music, so we're a FIBA sanctioned league. To be FIBA sanctioned, you have to follow all their rules, but you're allowed, I think, a handful of changes to it. And one of them is the Elam ending. And another one is that we're playing music throughout the entire game, right? It's a small thing until you go to the game. And then you're like, there's no boring times, because during a timeout, music's going, and we hire local DJs, and, we make sure that they're good, and that fans enjoy them. And then there you go. And then every different place, the music makes each event completely unique. So now imagine going to the Montreal, the Verdun Auditorium down there, and you're hearing local French hip hop artists playing, right? And then you're seeing young kids who know that artist going, hey, that's whoever it may be. And then, so now we're not only inspiring the young basketball player watching the guys in the court, we're inspiring the young artist, the 8-year-old who wants to maybe, rap one day, is hearing the guy from his street who's only 18, who got his music played in the gym. Well, now he's like, I can do that. Right. And it's like, sport and music is the exact same thing. And there's always, there's alliance of basketball, right? Where it's like, everybody that's a rapper wants to be a basketball player. Everyone's a basketball player wants to be a rapper. Right. And it's like that with every different sport in a lot of different ways. But I think at basketball, more than anything, the lines really are blurred. And it's very cool to be able to pregame, kind of look around and see, everybody's head bobbing to the same song, to the same, it's like that connection. And it's very cool. And then another time, down in Niagara, we have a live band, right? And they're kind of, the country rock kind of style. And sure, there's some people who are like, oh, what's this? And then other times you see people who you wouldn't expect, they've never heard that song before, but now they're getting into it. And they kind of look at somebody else and they're like, yeah, this is okay. And it's like, that's really cool stuff, man. And that is all about coming together. And that's what the CBL is all about as well.
That's one of the things I was very curious about, in that music here in Canada, as you go from coast to coast, is definitely going to have a different flavor as you go from province to province. Yeah. Obviously, if you're out in the Maritimes, it's going to have that, almost maritime and sometimes Celtic kind of feel to it. Yep. Of course, you've got some great hip hop artists in Montreal and Toronto. Get to the prairies and that area. You've got some good country music out west. You have a very diverse and eclectic choice of music. Do you find that the music getting played with the various teams changes so that, a Newfoundland Growlers playlist would be very different than anything out west?
Absolutely. And again, I think that's why it's important that, we have the live DJ there, right? It's not, I mean, everybody has said it for every live event, especially Raptors, like the canned, you know what I mean? Like everybody clap your hands. Like you don't hear that. You won't hear that in certain places in CEBL auditoriums, right? But you always hear that at a Raptor game, like, you know, the Toronto Blue Jays, right? They have those same things that you're like, oh my God, like they're playing the Addams Family thing again, you know? And now it's gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, the Addams Family clap, like, yay, because I remember that from when I was 12. But what's so unique about the CEBL is that's brand new. So we're building everything brand new. And the hope is 10 years from now, somebody is thinking like, oh, I can't wait to go to that game in Montreal. So I hear the new local French hip hop artists, right? Oh, I can't wait to hear what they play down here. And we would always do that, like, because so the CBL has 10 teams. Guelph, Hamilton, and Niagara are the three in the Southern Ontario region as of last year, and we've added Scarborough this year. But those three, we would always talk like, hey, like which place do you like the best music? You know what I mean? And it would change sometimes, right? And then they brought the live band into Niagara, and it was like, again, not everybody really dug it, but then other people really did, you know, and it was very different. And then, you know, we haven't even talked about the Scarborough edition and the fact that, you know, Nico of OVO is one of the part owners there. So I cannot wait to find out what is done there and how unique that is, right? And I think they are a group that, of course, they're going to have, you know, certain editions of Drake, but they're going to elevate young artists in their circle as well in Scarborough, and it's going to be so unique, and it's going to be very cool to see. And that's one of the perks of my job, is that I get to visit each of these areas and be able to kind of see that. And our CEO, Mike Moriali, he says like he lays it out. Like, this is entertainment. Like, when I come to one of your games, and if there's a dead point, like, I'm texting you, why is it dead right now? Like, what's going on? How come there isn't music? How come there isn't something going on? Because it has to be entertainment, right? No sport is good enough. The highest level of sport is not good enough without entertainment. And that's what the CEBL is really focused on. The fact that, hey, not every game is going to be amazing. The endings are going to be good because of the Elam ending, but we have to make sure that every game is an experience. And that's what the focus is on.
I'm going to pull out an archaic reference, and you're probably going to laugh when I mention it, but you probably remember the Jock Jams CDs.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Is there ever going to be a day, and, you know, obviously maybe not call it Jock Jams, but is there ever a day when you can see a CEBL mixer of music that represents the teams across the country come out?
I'm going to have to send this to our guy Ansh, and I'm sure he's already thought about it. Yeah, I think that would be great. And I think it would be a really good idea. You know, say you have it as 20 tracks, and for each team gets 2 tracks. You know what I mean? And, I mean, that's a very cool idea. And you could have that eclectic mix all the way across, right? You could have 2, you know, deep hip hop mixes from the Scarborough team, you know, and then getting into Hamilton, have something a little bit different, the kind of country rock down here in Niagara, Guelph, maybe a little more of a heavy metal kind of feel. You know what I mean? Like, it would be very cool to kind of lay that out and have that work. Of course, I don't know how that would work with royalties and all that other stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that would be very, very cool, and really go to what you're saying, is like, it would show that type of sport feel across Canada. And hockey's had that. But again, we joke, like, Jock Jams was built out of hockey, right? And it was like, it was the same tracks. Like, nobody would know the song Black Betty if it wasn't for minor hockey, right? Like, outside of the people who live that world, live that day. But for me, you know, growing up in the 80s, the only reason I know Black Betty is because of growing up in hockey arenas and hearing that song, right? So that's a perfect example. Jock Jams, man, you're after my heart.
You do realize there's someone listening now going, oh man, that was my CD.
Exactly. Of course it was, man. Everybody had it, right? And hey, we're getting up near Christmas time. It was a stocking stuffer.
Absolutely. This is the Major Mixtape Podcast. Our guest today, Jason Tom, the Director of Basketball Operations for the Canadian Elite Basketball League. We're going to step away for a quick second, but when we come back, we're going to learn more about Jason.
What's up, Combat Crew? Matt here from the Mortal Kombat Podcast, and I wanted to take a second to let you all know that on Friday, December 17th, starting at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, we will be hosting our annual charity stream live at twitch.tv/naturalhattrick. That's NTRLHATTRICK. And this year, we will be raising funds for Heart Support and their mission to make mental health care more accessible for all. We will be playing a custom 5e D&D game where your donations directly affect the game. You can cast creatures to battle our heroes, cast spells for or against them, buy a mystery token to put down the Plinko board, or summon a mighty dragon. And we are setting out to raise $1,000, and we would love to have you come hang out and have some fun with us. And as an added bonus, if we make our goal of $1,000, the folks from the podcast will be doing the One Chip Challenge live on that stream. Seriously, Google it. It's pretty wicked. Hope to see you all there on Friday, December 17th, starting at 4 p.m. Pacific Time.
Welcome back to the Meijul Mixtape Podcast. Our guest today, Jason Tom, the Director of Basketball Operations for the Canadian Elite Basketball League. Now, Jason, let's talk a little bit about you. You entered broadcasting, and I'm not even going to count how many years ago because I don't want either of us to feel old at all. But what was it that, made you want to follow that career path?
Yeah, I mean, it all started, everyone says like, oh, it's that one moment. And I just had one teacher, Miss MacGyver was her name, Central Peel Secondary School, Brampton, Ontario. And it was grade 10. And she just looked at me and said, had you ever thought of becoming a journalist? And I was like, no, absolutely not. Because I hadn't thought about doing anything at that point besides playing baseball or basketball or whatever. And she said, yeah, you write like a journalist. Like, we had a 1,500-page essay or 1,500-word essay. And she's like, you could have made that 1,000 and gotten an A and killed it. And you made it 1,500 and I had to give you a B because it was so boring. You know what I mean? And that she was just very honest. She's like, you got a B because you had to make 500 words up to fatten it up. And it was terrible. But I saw what you were doing and you should be a journalist because that's what journalists do. So that just started me on the path. And the next year I had to get an internship, or I think it was called an internship, volunteer position. And back then we used to have Rogers Community Television. And I remember they already had the 2 jobs given away. And one of them, and it's so cool to see the paths. One of them was given to Farah Nasser, who's now the national host on Global News, right? And she was amazing even back then. She had the one job and someone else had the other job. So they had a reporter, videographer. That was the 2 jobs. Farah got the reporter. There was a videographer that was there as well, or a cameraman technically. And then I came in and was like, I'll do anything. I'll do anything. Because I wasn't skilled enough to do anything. So I'll do anything and everything. And then she made, Diane Stokes was her name. She's actually married to a very well-known cameraman now. And she still works in the industry. And she made a position, a 3rd position for me. And I was 16. And then I went from that to hosting OHL hockey games. The Brampton Battalion Mississauga Ice Dogs had just started. And I was a reporter for that and did that. That's where I met Mark Heineken, who ended up working at the Score. And then it just built from there. And it was from that to the Fan 590, which was then Fan 1430. And then the Score. And then it just built on from there. So that's exactly how it started. It was just one teacher saying hey, you ever thought about doing this? And I was like, I haven't thought about doing anything. So that sounds good. And then it just didn't stop. But volunteerism is what trailed me the whole way through all that. And I had like all of us back then, right? 3 jobs, right? I sold safety boots, had an internship through Humber College at the Fan 590 and was working at the Score. So I had 3 jobs for 3 years approximately while finishing up school, and then just built on from there. And that's just the way it happened. And it just kept going. And then the next pathway. But again, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the Score. The Score was the only reason that I had any opportunity to do any of that, make the mistakes, learn from all these great people. That's the only reason I got to where I am right now and where I got to with Sportsnet for those last few years was all because of the Score. And I don't know, man, I was on borrowed money for so long, Jay. I always joke, I maxed out at what I was and where I was coming from. I'm not going to do that. I came from nothing, but my dad was a mailman. My mom worked in an office, right? I was just a guy, I could have just ended up, working at a home hardware type thing and probably loved my life. But I just kept going. And the only reason was I just kept saying yes to things and just kept going and going and going. And that's really like how it came down to it. And I see people now who are putting so much into chasing their dreams, and like, God love them for it, but like I wouldn't have been able to do that. Like I wouldn't have been able to sink a ton of money into chasing my dream. I just wouldn't have been able to do it. It was just hard work is all I had, right? I didn't have money. I didn't have the ability to pay. I didn't go to university. I went to Humber College. I remember I spent $8,000, including books and parking, on my 3 years of college. $8,000. Right. And again, that's dating me, I'm sure, but it's like, you know what I mean? It's not what you have, it's what you make of it. That's 100% the truth.
When you think about those early days, volunteering at the local cable station, covering smaller, like OHL hockey and the like, the mandate, or at least part of the mandate of community cable, was to not only, showcase the community, but to also develop volunteers and help them learn broadcasting. When you think about, the National Prep Association, when you think about, North Pole Hoops, a lot of what you've been doing is very much that in developing the skills of everyone around you and everyone who's a part of it. How much of that came from that community TV philosophy that helped develop you?
Yeah, man, like 100%. And it's another thing I struggle with. Because I do Twitter's my connection to like the next generation, and I don't tweet much, but I read it all and I see it and I get it. Like I 100% get it. But I see all the talk of like, unpaid internships, volunteering. People need to live, and I get it because it's way more expensive than it is now, and people aren't living at home. You know what I mean? Or people can't live at home, or people have to take care of their parents and stuff like that, right? But having said all that, there is like an inherent drive, and everything you just explained there, there is something you get from not only volunteering your own time, but being around other people that are like-minded that cannot be replicated anywhere. Like it's impossible. And I think there's a lot of things I know happening with, the social world now that is, I think stunting the growth of people individually. Right. And that's it. Like, man, I got a lot of faults, right? I'm still working on a lot of stuff, but there's one thing I can honestly say is like I am black and white. Like I am what I am. Like there's no BS. And that comes from that situation. If you're a volunteer, you can't BS your way through it, right? Because like you can't just say, like somebody can't say to you, like, get out of here. Like we're paying you money, and you did it bad, you're fired. Like there is none of that. You can't run away. People can't just cut you off. It's like, you got to work your way through it. Like you have to do it. Like, well, I'm here. Like I'm volunteering. Like, I gotta work it out. Like I gotta figure it out. Like if I'm not good at this, I have to get good at this. Or this person has to say, you know what? Like your skills aren't good for this, but guess what? We're going to put you over here and your skills are good for that. And then you like take off from there. Right. And I found that at North Pole Hoops, like I put people in a position and it's like, they're not that guy. And then I see him 6 months later and he's that guy. Like, oh, that's great. Like perfect. And then there's other times where like people come up, oh, she is perfect for this. Like she'll be amazing at this because I know what that needs. And then I'm going to be like, hey, just trust me on this. Just go do this and you'll be great. Like, and I've done this with like high level people, like former athletes that have come back and have been like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, go here, go to here, do that. And then you'll be here. And it happened like that. And I don't want the, oh man, like you made it. No, it's just like, it's just seeing it, and you don't see it unless you've lived it, and you don't live it unless you do it. And if you only did things that you got paid for, like you're not going to get everything, right? You're going to miss out on stuff. But having said all that, I understand that times have changed and you can't. But, actually one of the girls who works at North Pole Hoops, one of the women, women who works at North Pole Hoops right now, is a nurse. She makes great money being a nurse. But she loves basketball and loves the sport. And she came to me and said, I'm doing that to fund my passion. And I was like, and I don't know how I hadn't heard that line before, but is that not like exactly what your life has been, my life has been? Like, we're funding our passion, like your passion, like being in a band, making a mixtape, music, that's your passion. But you're funding doing all this wonderful stuff through the thing you're really good at, which is everything to do with media. And that's amazing. So if everybody can kind of maybe do that and just be like, okay, like I got to do my job to fund, but let me find my passion. And then one day you won't have to fund your passion anymore. One day you'll just grab it and your passion will be your job. Right. And that, I hope that happens for everybody out there.
Obviously, there's going to be people who are listening to this, maybe want to get into broadcasting, maybe want to get into, working behind the scenes of basketball. And there's two things that kind of really stand out of everything that you've talked about so far is talent and perseverance. Which one is more important for someone who's looking to get onto that journey?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is perseverance. Talent's nice, but everybody has a talent, right? Like your talent may not be dunk a basketball, but it can be identifying somebody who's very good at basketball who can't necessarily dunk a basketball yet. Everybody has a talent within them, and it just sometimes takes longer to find it. But how do you find that talent? But persevering through everything so you get to that point. And sometimes a talent is perseverance, right? Like if you're one of those people that just changes your career path a ton of times, and I think we always did that at the Score, or anytime in media when it gets to that dreaded time of the year where, oh, here they go, like we're firing 50 people and it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. And I was one of those guys. It's one of those things where it's like the perseverance of getting through that can become a talent. Like nothing is going to end up knocking you fully out and you keep coming back. And that can become a talent. And some talented people have never had to persevere through anything, right? Because they're so talented that they've never been fired, right? Or maybe their talent is being able to, and one thing I was never good at, right? It's a talent is being able to work the situation and the people and knowing who you have to, kiss up to and be tight with and all those other things. And like, that is a talent, right? But some people don't have that talent. So they have to persevere through the things that come as a result of not having that talent. So I think perseverance trumps all. And through that perseverance, I think everybody will eventually find what their talents are if it's not obvious to you just yet.
One of the key things about, the features that you would put together and all the content that you created is that it's storytelling. And as you approach, each individual story, what's your process when you have a story in your lap and you're like, okay, now I need to turn this into something. How do you approach that?
I think the first thing is like, why would someone care about it? And then why would everybody care about it? Like, I think that's the biggest thing, because it's one thing to tell a basketball story to basketball people, but how can you tell that basketball story to a hockey person to have them care? Or how do you tell that basketball story to somebody who doesn't care about sports at all to be interested? And a lot of that time it's, another probably overused phrase is human interest. Finding that human interest, but finding the human side of it and trying to, and I think that was a big thing for the first few features I did on Up Next. It was all about like taking somebody out of, like, if they're a basketball player, how do I take them out of the basketball court? Right. So that you can see them elsewhere. And I think that's important, kind of humanizing kind of everybody. And, at the highest level, I see that, they've been trying to do that for NHL players forever, and it's very difficult to do. And I think it's a challenge in any storytelling that you do anywhere. Back to broadcasting, like broadcasting a basketball game, just in itself, like where you don't have, it's not a $20,000 production. You don't have 5 cameras and replays and floor angle and all the other things. It's wide angle. Like, why do I care? Like, why do I care about this basketball game? And it's all about scene setting, right? Why is this game important, right? And for the Basketball Champions League, for example, like that storytelling about, I'm already thinking about it, right? I'm already thinking it's like, this is historic. This has never happened before. That's why you should care, because it's something that 10 years from now is going to be commonplace. And you'll be like, wow, I remember the first year that this happened. First time ever, a team from Edmonton played a team in Nicaragua, right? Like Edmonton, Nicaragua. Those 2 words have really never been spoken in the same sporting sentence before. So it's historic. And I think that's my first thought of, is like, make people feel like they're involved in something that's never happened before. And most people like that. And I think we have a great sense of pride in Canada. We saw it with soccer in Edmonton, right? And how special, why was that such a big deal, right? Most people probably didn't even know, like, oh, okay, World Cup, okay, eventually, but CONCACAF, people don't really know, but they tuned in because they were like, soccer, Edmonton, snow, Mexico. That's unique and it's historic. So now I'm interested. And that's storytelling, right? Getting people interested, even if they're not.
One of the key aspects of helping tell the story of a feature, when you get to post-production, of course, is the music. But for you as a producer and as a reporter, when you were interviewing these people, when did you hear the music of the feature? When you're interviewing them, or when you finally got to post-production? Like, as you're hearing their story, are you hearing the music, as they're telling their story?
Like, I think for me as a producer, it was in post-production. Sorry, not post-production, more pre-post-production, right? Like before, and I knew that there was times where sometimes I would sit down when we were going through, royalty-free music, and it was just like, ooh, this reminds me of, right? I remember we did one on Naz Long, and Naz was a cool story, but we didn't really have any like really good visuals. So my whole thing was like, how am I going to make this interesting? And he was from Mississauga. And at that point, Mississauga was really blowing up. And right now, Mississauga, Brampton, the Peel region is, forget Toronto and, much respect to the Toronto basketball scene, but the Peel region is dominated for the last 10 years of basketball players. And I remember we went from his house in Mississauga down to his high school, and this was back when GoPros were new on cars, and we recorded out of the front of the Score vehicle the drive down there. And I remember I had a song back at the station that was remind me of Beastie Boys track. And so I wanted to do that, drive down there, fast forward, slow motion, cars passing and all that to this Beastie Boys track. And then that was an example of when the music carried the whole feature. And then there's other times where I get back, like the interview's happening and it's such a good interview that I'm like, I want the track that like nobody even notices is playing. You know what I mean? Until all you care about is the begin and the end. Right? Like and you don't even notice the song. So it would always be, it would be in production. But at the same time, I understand, I think it's a real skill for people to be able to on site put the emotion of an interview to music like that. Like that's something that I wish that I had. But it's something, again, especially when you're talking about like people have it easy now when you can pay money for a big song and have that be the feature. You know what I mean? Or in TikTok, you can have the big song be, it's only 15 seconds or whatever, but you can have that carry it. Back when we were doing things, man, you know what I mean? It was jingletunes.com or whatever. And you just had to kind of guess. And I mean, that was a challenge, but it was fun, right?
I like this song. It's called Sounds Like Pearl Jam. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It was like the old video game thing where they would make like the player's name kind of like, instead of Pearl Jam, it would be like Diamond Dunk. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. I was good. You'd be like, oh my gosh, they mean Pearl Jam. I deciphered it. We're great. It's fun.
Although now I want Diamond Dunk to be a hip hop cover band of Pearl Jam songs. This now needs to happen.
It has to happen. Put it out in the universe. It will happen.
Obviously, as you're putting so much work into the CBL, and as you put so much work into like everything in your career, obviously some people kind of lean on music as a way of driving them. Do you find that you listen to certain types of music when you're doing certain tasks?
Yeah. And, I've gotten away from it lately. And I actually thought about it today. I was like, I need to go back to that. And I think it's because it's something new to me right now that I'm so hyper focused on, like, I need silence, and I have a 7-year-old. Surprised she hasn't jumped down here yet to tell me to put her to bed. But I need silence because it's so rare. You know what I mean? And after working at home for so long, I go into the office and it's like, I can't do certain tasks because of that, because I need silence to do certain things. But when I need, like, man, I straight up, 3 hours classical music for certain stuff, like, Mozart, Beethoven, like just really, really, like that type of music is what I need. But then if I'm going to a game, to call a game, I want, the type of music I associate to basketball. I want to listen to that on the way in. And then when I'm there, I hear that. And then on the ride home, it's like, because it's usually night, and it's a summer league, so I'm driving home at night, so I'm able to have kind of all the windows open and stuff like that. And that a lot of the times is music I find almost, I don't want to say from my childhood, but from my teenage years type thing. And I feel like, and it's funny because I know they call it made you a mixtape. So I wrote down some songs because I wanted to be able to really but I find that those songs from my youth, from the time when I started out in broadcasting, I find that's what I listen to now at the end of a day after I've accomplished, finished my day. And it's almost like, it reminds me like, man, like when you were listening to this song 20 years ago, if somebody said, hey, like 20 years from now, you will be driving home from calling a live basketball game that you got paid to broadcast in Guelph, you'd be like, well, that sounds pretty cool. And I think that's like something I try to do to myself. Like I try to, those days that you're stressed out or, man, there's so much, like I'm never going to get through it all. You really have to be like, yeah, but like, look what you're doing, man. Like, yeah, it's never going to end, but do you want it to end? And you're like, oh yeah, no, I don't want it to end. Like, this is pretty awesome. Right. And I find that music does that for me. Right. But I'm really bad now, like really bad at finding new music. And I don't know, I'm not ashamed of that. You know what I mean? Like I literally, like people are like, oh, you should listen to this. You may like it. And I'm like, no, I probably won't. Like, it's so bad, but I'm just so focused on like, no, man, it's like this year and back. and I go further back. Like I'll listen to 40s. Like I got the free Sirius XM thing in my car and I was upset because they took away the 40s music. And I was like, what? I want to listen to 40s. You know what I mean? Because it's music I haven't heard. And it's like raw and normal. And do you know what I mean? It's like, everything's based out of that. That's what I'm interested in. It's weird, man. Very weird.
There comes a point in everyone's life when for the first time they go to the record store with their own money and they buy themselves an album. Not just, you got something for Christmas, you got something for your, no, you went to the record store first time. This is mine. Do you remember what that album was for you?
I'm going to guess that nobody's ever answered this answer to this question. If this is one you ask everybody, the first one I bought for myself was one of two. And I'm trying to remember, like, because I want to get it right, but I'll give you two because it was one of them. It was either a Weird Al Yankovic record or, sorry, I'm going to say CD, because I got tapes bought for me. Like Michael Jackson Bad was one that I remember sold, like given to me for my birthday.
Right.
But it was either a Weird Al Yankovic or Adam Sandler's First. That's what it was. Like, and isn't that crazy? But like, that's what it was. It wasn't, but now Weird Al Yankovic at least was music. But I remember like memorizing Weird Al Yankovic tracks. Like right? But that again, it was my age, because when do you get your first, record? Or I was like 8, you know what I mean, or 10, and that was what it was. And then soon after that was that, and then it was the Columbia House times where it was just mass amounts, you know what I mean, coming in. But I bet you nobody's ever said that to you, and maybe it was because of the varied amount. Like, oh, I got comedy and I got music, and the Weird Al songs were based off of songs that I knew, right? So they were just way funnier lyrics. So to me at the time, it was like, this is perfect. I don't have to sing it.
I will admit that no one has said a Weird Al Yankovic album as far as their first album goes, but you wouldn't be the first person to admit your Columbia House shame. So that's okay.
Good.
But that does bring us to the big question of the podcast. So if you, Jason Tom, had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, hi, I'm Jay, want to play some hoops, you hand them a mixtape. And on that tape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape and why are those songs there?
Okay. So when I went back through, I did this last night after we had talked. And I did find that it really did kind of mirror my life in a lot of ways as I started going through, because I wanted to make sure I kind of covered it all, and I wrote them down. So I had them and I tried to order them like in my life to an extent. So the first one, my parents had 1050 Chum playing 24/7, except for at night, in the kitchen on one of those radios that you'd stick on the bottom of cupboard. So it just played nonstop. So 1050 Chum. So first one I had, Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys. So I think it's one of the most beautiful songs in the history of the world. And if that plays, I'm singing it. I'll stop everything I'm doing. Huge Beastie Boys fan. And I couldn't pick one Beastie Boys record. I got one. I now have a record player, thankfully, and I got one of their kind of collaboration records that came with their book, and my daughter loves it, and she loves all the songs on it. But there was a track on there that I hadn't heard, and I love it because it mixed together so many different types of music that I like, and it's called "Don't Play No Games That I Can't Win." I don't know if you know that track. It samples like a really cool kind of reggae track in it. And I picked that one because I love the Beastie Boys so much. And that was a track that I had heard that I had never heard before. And I was like, that's how much I love the Beastie Boys, is that I can hear a track I've never heard before and it instantly becomes one of my favorite. My childhood, and another one that when it hits now, like it just brings back everything. And I don't mean to put my fingerprints all over this one, but I Want to Get High by Cypress Hill, just because of the beat. I think everybody can remember that hits, and it just takes you back to a time. And that was one that I had to put on. Three Little Birds by Bob Marley, because that was a song through my entire life that I've loved, and my daughter absolutely loves it now. Know Your Enemy, Rage Against the Machine. I hope you are now seeing with just how much I'm including everything in my entire life. One of my favorite hip hop songs of all time is Triumph by the Wu-Tang Clan, because I love the way that it goes through that entire group. You want to talk about a song that I listened to on my way home in the middle of the night? The Voodoo People by Prodigy. I know you're not a huge Prodigy fan. And I know that these songs are ones that you'll probably hate. Another one, and I talk about current music that I'm not a huge fan of, but Nonstop by Drake is one that speaks to me, I think, a little bit, because I think it speaks to kind of I've been nonstop of continuing to kind of chase after my dream of basketball. Another one that comes from my childhood, much along with the Cypress Hill days. And again, just because of growing up in Brampton in the 90s, Jump Around, House of Pain, which again, my daughter absolutely loves. So it's allowed me to continue to like this, as some people would say, bad music. And then I'll end with one that I'm going to hope that you appreciate, because I could see your disgust on your face through a lot of these.
Oh, no, you mentioned House of Pain and Rage Against the Machine, so I'm with you on this. So.
You're with that? Okay, thank God. You Can't Always Get What You Want by the Rolling Stones. And that was one that the Rolling Stones are a band that, like, I didn't realize how many of their songs I absolutely love. Always like the Stones, but just never kind of put two and two together of the catalog of like how many of them like I absolutely love. And You Can't Always Get What You Want like really sums up like my life in a lot of different ways. Like, because I didn't really know what I wanted. And every time I got into a new role or something, I was like, I always thought, oh, well, this is what I want. I want to do this next. I want to do this. And I almost never got to that. But I'm so happy. You know what I mean? So it's like, I didn't get what I wanted, but I didn't know what I wanted, but I definitely got what I need. And that's where I'm at right now. You know what I mean?
You mentioned a lot during that list, songs that your daughter loved. And obviously, as a parent, we try and kind of pass down, our musical likes, because, that way we can all sing along together in the car. Is that something that your parents did for you as you were growing up?
Yeah. I mean, again, I talked about 1050 Chum, and like, that was really what it was about, right? Like, it was like every time you got in the car, that's what it was, it had to be something that everybody could listen to. And like, you could really, and now it's it's funny, back then you couldn't pick the song, right? So it was like, well, what's on next? You know what I mean? And it was like, if somebody didn't like it, they kind of just had to shut up while other people kind of went through it. And even to find the next tune on the dial, it wasn't always that easy. And then now it's like, I get in there with my daughter and it's like, I want you to play number 15. Then we're going to go to number 8. And that, you know what I mean? Like, and it's very funny. And it's funny, all the different types of music that she does like, like really loves like reggae, you know what I mean? And like, I was always, again, growing up in Brampton, I was in a very multicultural area, and that was a lot of the music that we really liked, you know what I mean? And like, I'm a very closet kind of dance hall fan, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be able to go out and bust a move to those type of tracks, but like, it's definitely something that I listen to here at home and dance around like a goofball with my daughter. You know what I mean? Now, it's a lot different than listening to oldies driving in the old Oldsmobile, but it all comes back to the same thing, right? Just connecting. And, there's so many studies of like dancing and singing and how much that helps and helps with stress and stuff like that. And I think that's sometimes stuff what kids remind us to do. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's just listen, put on a record and dance around like a goofball. And it's like, I don't really want to do that right now, but I probably should. You know what I mean? So I think that is the modern day driving around in the car type thing, like where it's like turn the radio up, same sort of thing.
Looking forward, with all the work that you put into the CEBL so far and the work that's still to come, what is your hope for the future of the Canadian Elite Basketball League?
I think for it to become the best basketball league in North America outside of the NBA. And, it's going to be difficult to do that for it to be a summer league, but I think it can be done. But I think it's having it to become a destination. I talked about it being a place for our Canadian players to like be able to play, but I think having it as a destination so that American players are like, I want to go up and play there. So NCAA, people who graduate the NCAA say, I want to go up to Canada, play there, and then go play internationally overseas. And then in the summertime, I'm going to go back to Canada because I love playing in Toronto, love playing in Newfoundland, love playing in Montreal. And I think what that's going to do, it's not only going to build the basketball culture in those cities and build the basketball in Canada, it's going to create, even increased tourism, increased love for the country of Canada. And there's a lot of great stories of young basketball players coming out of Canada where their parents came up to Canada to play a professional sport and then met their significant other, settled down, had children, and then ended up having a child who ended up representing Canada on an international stage. CFL players, some of the old pro leagues in Canada, there have been pro leagues up here that didn't last too long, but that they ended up meeting somebody who was also an athlete, end up having a child that represents Canada on the international stage in the Olympics or the NBA. And I think that's what it is. Multiculturalism to me, I think it's because I grew up in Brampton, is so important. And that's not only cultures and race, but also like where people come from and what they bring with them. It doesn't have to be somebody, it could be two people of the same race or cultural background, but from two different areas. And then what that brings together, right? Somebody from Louisiana and somebody from Saskatchewan, right? They could be very similar, but those differences are going to create something that didn't exist before. And that's what the CEBL is about, I think, is creating something that didn't exist before. And I think the people involved in that sport and involved in that league will create something that didn't exist before. And I think more than anything, it creates legacy. And I think that's what everybody ends up finding as they get on in life is like, what's the legacy that you're living and what's the legacy that you're leaving behind? And I think helping build a league is a legacy that, you know, if that league can survive forever, that's a pretty awesome legacy to leave, right?
Obviously, we know that as video games evolve, you know, they've gotten bigger and they've, you know, incorporated more leagues into it. You see the FIFA video games, and there's so many leagues involved. Is there ever a day, do you envision, that the CEBL is put into an NBA 2K title?
Never even thought about that till you started this question. But yeah, because the 2K games have the European leagues, right? Yeah, like very cool. And because they also have the international teams, right? So, I mean, you're going to see the Canada team on there is going to have Phil and Tommy Scrubb, played at Carleton and now play overseas and play for the national team, played with the national team for the last decade, right? So why wouldn't they be? And then, you know, I'm going to guess that the teams that were playing in this Basketball Champions League America would probably have been included in these games. So why not, right? Why wouldn't 10 teams out of Canada, like why wouldn't, you know, the Scarborough Shooting Stars be involved in that? So, man, you've given me a lot of really good things to bring back to the office and be like, I was on this podcast the other day, and Ansh, let me tell you about two ideas he had that you're going to love. I love it.
We'll manifest it right now. Dear 2K Sports, you know, this is Jay, 2K Sports, Jay, CEBL, NBA video games. Let's make it happen. Jay, thank you so much for this.
Absolutely.
Where can fans and basketball fans alike find the CEBL on the internet?
CEBL.ca, but you know what, man? Like, who cares about websites? Go to CEBL League on Twitter, and I believe that's the Instagram handle as well. But you put in CEBL on Instagram, you'll find it. And man, the crew does such an amazing job. They put out some amazing things. So yeah, definitely follow us on there. We got some big things coming up in the off season here. We got media days coming up. That's going to create some great stuff. You can find me at _Jason Tom THOM on Twitter. And yeah, anybody needs to reach out, have any questions. Like I said, I love mentoring. I love answering questions and helping people along, man. So definitely reach out.
Jay, thank you so much for this. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to this edition of the Made You a Mixtape podcast. Now, if you're listening to this on an audio streaming service, you can watch this entire interview over on YouTube. But if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you can go to any audio streaming website, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, TuneIn, Good Pods, wherever you get it, download it, listen to it on the go. This has been the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Until next time, take care.